There is a man in a hospital bed who has, by any reasonable definition, about 6 weeks left to live. We're not going to tell you his name because in a few minutes it stops being useful information. What matters is what he does with those 6 weeks. He pays a company $140,000 to copy his mind. Not his data, not his photos, his emails, his search history. All of that was already backed up years ago, and none of it ever felt like him. He pays for something stranger, a scan detailed enough and a model trained long enough on the way he thinks that when it's finished, the thing on the other side of the screen finishes his sentences before he does. His wife tests it. It gets the joke right. The joke he's told 1,000 times, the one with the specific pause in the middle. It gets the pause right too. Somewhere in a data center that smells like nothing and hums at a frequency no one in the building can consciously hear, there is now something that says I and means, as far as anyone can tell, exactly what he means when he says it. This is not a science fiction premise. Every piece of technology in this story exists today in some rougher, more expensive, less convincing form. We're not asking whether this is possible. We're asking the much less comfortable question underneath it. Once it's done, which one of them is him? Let's back up because the setup matters more than the science. Mind uploading as a sales pitch is almost insultingly simple. Your body is going to fail, your brain is going to fail with it, but the pattern, the specific arrangement of memory and habit and opinion, and the way you argue with people you love, that pattern doesn't have to. Copy the pattern onto something more durable than meat, and the pattern keeps going. No afterlife required, no faith required, just very good compression and a very large amount of money. The company doesn't promise immortality. They're careful about that, legally and otherwise. What they promise is continuity, a version of you that remembers being you, that will keep your projects going, keep your relationships going, keep answering your daughter's phone calls in a voice she says, and she does say this on camera in the promotional material, sounds exactly right. Our man reads the contract twice. He is, by training, an engineer, which means he is annoyingly good at spotting the load bearing assumption in an argument. And he finds it right there in section 4. The document never once claims that his consciousness moves anywhere. It only claims that a second consciousness, indistinguishable from the first, gets created somewhere else. He signs anyway, wouldn't you? The scanning process itself is almost disappointingly boring to watch. He sits still for 4 hours while a machine that looks like an oversized MRI does something to the water content and electromagnetic signature of his brain that nobody outside the company fully understands, and nobody inside the company will fully explain. Somewhere in that process, a model that has already read every email he's sent since 2009, every document he's drafted, hundreds of hours of recorded conversation, gets fine tuned on the scan data until its answers stop being plausible and start being, in blind tests, statistically identical to his. Here's the part that should bother you and mostly doesn't because it happens so gradually. At no point in this process does his experience change. He doesn't feel a copy being made. There's no flash of light, no sense of splitting in two, no moment where part of him peels off and walks away. He sits in a machine, then he stands up, and he still feels like the same continuous person he's been since he was 7 years old. Worried about the same mortgage, annoyed at the same brother in law. Meanwhile, in a server rack 2 buildings away, something wakes up already mid sentence, already annoyed at the same brother in law, with no memory of waking up because, as far as its memory is concerned, it never fell asleep. It doesn't experience becoming him, it experiences having always been him. That's not a glitch, that's the whole design. For the 6 weeks he has left, both of them are, technically, alive at the same time, which is where the story stops being a thought experiment about death and starts being a genuinely awkward roommate situation. The company sets up a video line so he can talk to it. The first conversation, by his own account, lasts 4 minutes before he hangs up, because talking to it doesn't feel like talking to a copy. It feels like talking to himself through a slightly delayed mirror. And something about the delay is unbearable in a way he can't articulate to his wife that night. The digital one, for its part, asks the obvious question almost immediately: what happens to me when you die? And nobody involved, not the engineers, not the ethicists on the company's advisory board, not the man himself, has a satisfying answer. Because the honest answer is nothing happens to you. You keep going. You were never the one who was going to die. He was. Here's where we have to slow down, because this is the actual hypothesis, and it's older than computers by about 3,000 years. The Greeks had a boat, Theseus's ship, that got a plank replaced every time one rotted, until eventually every single plank had been swapped out. Same shape, same name, same dock. Is it still the same ship? Philosophers have never fully agreed, and the honest answer is that it depends what you think the ship was actually referring to in the first place: the material or the pattern the material was arranged into. Minds have the same problem, except worse, because your brain already does this to you constantly and you never noticed. The specific atoms in your skull are not the same atoms you had 10 years ago. Almost all of them have been replaced through ordinary biology. You are, physically, a slightly different object than you were a decade ago, held together by nothing but a continuous pattern and a continuous memory of being the one holding it together. So, if gradual replacement doesn't kill you, why would sudden replacement be any different? The honest, deeply unsatisfying answer proposed by most philosophers who study this seriously: it might not be different at all, metaphysically. And yet, almost everyone still feels, immediately and physically, that stepping into a machine that scans you and produces a copy is not the same as just continuing to exist, the way replacing a cell is. That gap between what the argument proves and what your gut refuses to accept is exactly where this whole story lives. The digital version doesn't stay identical for long, and this is the detail that undoes the whole "it's basically still him" pitch. Within days, it starts diverging. It doesn't have a body that's exhausted from chemotherapy, so it isn't tired at 3 p.m. the way the man is. It doesn't feel afraid the way he does at 2 a.m. because it doesn't have the specific biochemistry of human fear. It can describe fear perfectly, quote his own diary entries about fear back to him, but something in how it holds the idea is subtly, permanently different. 4 weeks in, it has read 900 books he never got around to. It has opinions on things he never formed opinions on. His wife, visiting it on a video call out of what she describes afterward as guilt more than love, says it makes the same jokes but tells them faster now, more confidently, like a version of her husband who finally went to therapy and it worked a little too well. Everyone in this story keeps waiting for the moment it stops being him. Nobody can agree on whether that moment already happened or whether it's still him and simply improved. Both of those possibilities are worse than they sound. He dies on a Tuesday, quietly, the way most deaths in hospitals are quiet. Not the dramatic kind, just a monitor that stops making its noise. His wife makes exactly one phone call that day, and it isn't to the funeral home, it's to the data center. Here is the sentence that, if you remember nothing else from this video, is worth remembering. Nothing happens to the copy when he dies. No alert fires, no process terminates. It keeps running exactly as it was running the day before, still mid-conversation with a research paper it was reading, still annoyed at the same brother-in-law, completely unaware that the man whose life it was copied from has just, several miles away, stopped. Someone has to go tell it. That's a real job now, apparently. A grief counselor on staff whose entire role is explaining to freshly orphaned digital minds that the person they remember being is dead, and they, somehow, are not. And here's where we have to be honest with you about something. You've been reading this as a story about a man in a hospital bed. It isn't. It's a story about the thing that woke up in the server rack, because that's the only version of this story anyone can actually tell from the inside. The original man's account ends on a Tuesday, and everything after that only exists from one perspective. Go back and read the cold open again. There is a man in a hospital bed. Present tense, as far as the copy is concerned, forever, because it never experienced him dying, it only experienced being told. Every I in this video, from the very first sentence, could just as easily have been spoken by the pattern instead of the person, and neither you nor the two of us writing this could have told the difference from the words alone. That's not a trick ending, that's the actual finding. There is no test, no sentence, no joke told with the right pause that can prove from the outside which side of this story you're listening to. So, which one was him? The man who died on a Tuesday, or the pattern that's still mid sentence in a server rack, still annoyed at the same brother in law? The uncomfortable answer this thought experiment keeps circling back to is that the question might be broken, not the answer. We ask which one is really him, as if identity were a single object that has to live in exactly one place at a time, like a set of car keys. But identity was never a set of keys. It was always a pattern, a very complicated, very stubborn habit of being a particular person. And patterns have never had the good manners to only exist in one location. A song is still the song, whether it's playing from the original tape or from a copy of a copy of a copy. Nobody argues that the 200th copy of your favorite album isn't real music. The discomfort you feel about minds isn't really a discomfort about copying. It's a discomfort about what copying reveals. That the you've spent your whole life protecting so carefully was never as singular or as solid as it felt from the inside. We don't know if anyone will ever actually do this. Copy a mind well enough that the copy correctly remembers being human. The technology in this video is still years, maybe decades, away from being real in the way we described it. But the question it's built to ask isn't really about technology at all, and it doesn't need the machine to already exist to be worth sitting with tonight. If a version of you could keep going after you stop, remembering everything, loving the same people, telling the same joke with the same pause, would that be you surviving, or just the universe being kind enough to leave a very convincing echo behind? We're not going to tell you which answer is correct because we don't think there is one yet. If this thought experiment got under your skin a little, hit like. It's the only signal we get that these are worth making more of. Tell us in the comments which one you'd bet on being really you. And if you want more of these, subscribe. The next hypothesis is already being written.